emotional eating is eating differently when there's stress in your life. Emotional eating is wanting to eat when you're not hungry or you're already full. Using food as a reward. Where it becomes a problem is when somebody feels as though they are avoiding tasks in their life, if they feel as though they are pulling away from relationships because of their relationship with food, or because they feel that they don't have coping mechanisms that may be less harmful than reaching for the food to try to placate yourself.
That was Sara Levite, a licensed psychotherapist and wellness coach who has been practicing for over 30 years with individuals and coaching groups and couples. And gosh, you ever meet somebody and you just feel like so peaceful from their presence? I get that from Sara. In today's podcast, we're going to be talking about overcoming emotional eating. And this is a subject that is very near and dear to my heart because I struggled with emotional eating for so many years of my life. And I see it in many of the lives of the people that I work with as weight loss clients. The information that Sara shares in this podcast, I feel, is really powerful because it talks about changing behaviors coming from a very loving place rather than a place of punishment, and really using elements of self-care to gently nudge yourself in the correct direction without judgment, fear, or anxiety. There are a lot of real-life tools that you can put to use today, so I hope you enjoy this conversation. Let's get into it with Sara Levite. All right, welcome, Sara Levite. Thank you so much for being here.
It's my honor. I'm happy to be here with you and your audience.
And wonderful. Well, can you tell us a little bit about yourself if people watching have just heard of you for the first time?
Sure. I'm a licensed psychotherapist and wellness coach, and I've been in private practice for over 30 years. And what I do is I try to integrate all of my passions, which is not only working with people on their emotional well-being, but also their physical well-being. And so that's why I feel as though I can offer people a well-rounded prescription, if you will, for their growth and their improvement and just their overall enjoyment of life and well-being.
I think that's so true. And I think what, the few times that we've spoken before, what makes you feel so peaceful and approachable to me anyways, is that you do incorporate those things. And it does feel really relatable to somebody who might be kind of in a challenge of trying to juggle life, because I feel like that's kind of where we all are, in one way or another, and being able to come at that in a very relatable way, but with things that are really actually helpful. So I appreciate you being here. And what I really want to talk about today is emotional eating, because I have to say, I work as a holistic nutritionist, and a lot of the people who come to me for weight loss
Mhm.
are dealing with that stronghold of emotional eating. It's very near and dear to my heart. I struggled with it for years, and I get it when people are feeling that struggle of eating beyond hunger. Food solves the problem of hunger. It doesn't help with the rest of the stuff. So can you shed a little bit of light on what you feel causes emotional eating?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I'm glad that you mentioned about and shared that you've had your own struggles. I too have had my struggles. I don't know very many women in our culture that haven't
Mhm.
had some issues around trying to disentangle their self-esteem and their eating behavior. And most of what I learned was born out of the work that I did with my clients and also the work that I did on myself. In
Mhm.
terms of what I learned from graduate school, that was maybe helpful, but that was just a tip of the iceberg. And so it was through my own journey and my own process. I was for 10 years, I was a compulsive overeater, and I weighed 40 pounds more than I do right now. And my life was consumed with
Mhm.
food. I
Yeah.
was either restricting or I was binge eating, and I was constantly trying to balance the two and make up rules in my head that, of course, I couldn't adhere to. So I decided to do a deep dive for myself, but also for the benefit of my clients. And in doing so, I learned that there's a big distinction between physical and emotional hunger. But a lot of people are unaware of that
Mhm.
because we get so many cues in our society about food, and we get so many cues and triggers in our society that have nothing to do with really necessarily what our body is asking for, but what our mind is asking for. So for me, if I were to define what emotional eating is, Emotional eating is eating differently when there's stress in your life. Emotional eating is wanting to eat when you're not hungry or you're already full. Using food as a reward. A lot of my clients, they report overeating in the evening. They get home from work, they're tired, they're stressed, they just want to unwind. So they oftentimes go in front of the TV and they will link that with eating, and before they know it, they're in this hypnotic state, right, from consuming foods and numbing themselves out on the television, and it's almost like they're using the food as a tranquilizer.
Oh, yeah,
So
totally.
and in a sense, what they're doing is they're saying to themselves, they're using it as a reward. They're saying, I had a hard day, it's the weekend, or I'm on vacation, I deserve this. And so that is a sign of emotional eating as opposed to physical hunger. Another one is eating to soothe your feelings, or as I said before, tranquilize yourself so you're not feeling what you're feeling. Eating to procrastinate doing a task. That
Hmm.
has nothing to do with physical bodily hunger. As a matter of fact, I might as well define some of the signs of physical hunger just to distinguish the two. When we're physically hungry, which means that our body needs more fuel, some of the signs are our stomach will growl, our body may start to feel weak from a lowering of the blood sugar, the hypoglycemia. You get a headache. As I said before, your blood sugar lowers. You may feel shaky or lightheaded. I know that that happens to me. And if it's physical hunger, then these symptoms dissipate after you consume the food,
Hmm.
because all your body is doing is it's sending off the flares saying, hey, I could use some more fuel. And when you listen to that and you give it the fuel, then it feels satiated, and it doesn't need to be preoccupied with that concern anymore. Emotional eating is very different. Emotional eating is for all of the reasons other than what physical hunger is. Now, that's not to say that if somebody's eating because they're at a party and they're not really hungry, but it's part of the conviviality, it's part of the socializing, that's not a problem. Where it becomes a problem is when somebody feels as though they are avoiding tasks in their life, if they feel as though they are pulling away from relationships because of their relationship with food, or because they feel that they don't have coping mechanisms that may be less harmful than reaching for the food to try to placate yourself. And incidentally, my experience has been not just with myself, but with my clients, that most people, when they eat for emotional reasons, they're not eating fruits and vegetables. Most of the time, they are eating the foods that are highly palatable, that tend to, from a scientific point of view, they tend to alter the brain chemistry.
Mm.
So, what they do is they could increase the dopamine level, they can bring on a sense of euphoria, or as I said before, a tranquilizing effect.
Mhm.
And so that's part and parcel of a lot of the processed foods that people overconsume. I seldom have somebody come to me and say, I have a problem with overeating fruit and vegetables,
I
just
know, yeah.
because biologically, what happens when you eat those foods and when they interact with your brain, it doesn't cause that addictive, obsessive cycle that happens.
And I also find with that, when you have a large quantity of fruits or vegetables, you really are satisfied and your body says, okay, I don't want to eat anymore. But that does
Mhm.
not happen. That switch does not turn off when you are having the processed foods. And so that's really interesting. I think it's so great the way that you just clearly define that, because sometimes we may not think that we have a problem with emotional eating at all.
Mhm.
And, just the way that we've been raised or how we've been conditioned, food can be something that we've always commiserated with or celebrated with or used to decompress. But in the same way that alcohol or drugs can be used, as a form of escapism or a buffering to just have that like space for a second, we I mean, I see this with people that I know as well as clients that I've worked with. We do use food in this kind of low grade addiction way that is a form, can be a form of decompression, escape, all the things that you mentioned. And not to reiterate the same thing over and over, but I find it fascinating, and it's always interesting that people may not think they have an issue with this at all. But when you take a step back and you think about it, you think, gosh, you know what? Why do I do this? Or why, begin to question those behaviors. And you may see, oh, yeah, there is a trigger every day at 4 p.m. I'm eating a whole bag of chips and salsa. Why is this? You
That's
know?
right. That's right. And one of the things that I do with my clients is I help them to identify what are some of the things that are causing them to be the challenges in their life that are prompting them to be emotionally hungry. Because there is something going on emotionally
Mhm.
that is not being satisfied by talking to somebody or by changing your inner dialogue. So, what are some of the things in your life that you may be using food to cope with? And common areas for this are financial stressors, health concerns, conflict in your marriage or other family relationship, work dissatisfaction, a living or housing circumstance that is unstable, busyness, and this
Mhm.
is rampant in our culture. People pride themselves on, well, I don't have to get a lot of sleep, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, but it takes a toll and they pay a
Mhm.
price. And oftentimes the price that they pay is that their body gets they get so hyped up that they then again need to use something to calm them. And in a society, there's an abundance of food that can have a tranquilizing effect, and it's so abundant and it's so easily accessible. Another thing that people may be feeling some emotional hunger because of a major life transitions, if somebody is getting divorced, or if somebody is retiring, or even if somebody's moving to a new community, changing a job. These can be really stressful events. Grief and loss. There are some
Mhm.
people that when they're experiencing grief and loss, their appetite subsides. And then other people where they find that they need the comfort or they want the comfort of food. And again, they're not really tending toward the fruits and the vegetables when they seek that. The bane of my existence is the food industry and the way that our brains get hijacked by all of the marketing
Mhm.
that is that is pointed our way subtly, overtly, uh, and it just feels to me as though there is this lack of education and lack of understanding about what people are actually putting in their bodies.
Mhm.
And the shiny packages, the use of the word natural on a food package, which means little less than zero. And so really people, if people can be educated just so that they are making informed decisions about what they eat and not blindly consuming foods that may be contributing to a relationship with food that's not healthy and is making them miserable.
Yeah, because
Another
even if somebody wants to, sorry to interrupt, but even if somebody can realize that, okay, this is really happening to me and I want to stop, there is in those packaged foods, there is that bit of, low grade addiction that can occur. And it's hard to break that cycle. Go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt.
No, it's no problem. What you say is absolutely true. And so many people believe that they are eating well when in fact they're not necessarily understanding what is actually in this food item.
Mhm.
When you're looking at a packaged food item, I encourage people not to look at the nutrition label. I think people get a little bogged down with the number of
Mhm.
calories and the amount of protein and fat. I encourage people to look at the ingredient list to
Yes.
just know what is it that I'm about to put in my body. We certainly wouldn't want to put, something other than good gasoline into our car. So the fact that we would be willing to put chemicals and just pure junk that's void of any nutrition into our body, oftentimes people don't even realize that.
Totally
So
true.
it's a learning process.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you feel like you are somebody, even just listening to this, where you're thinking, I don't have a problem, and then you're like, oh, actually, maybe I do have a problem. What are some suggestions that you can give to people to begin to become aware of it and begin to make changes for themselves?
Right. And well, and I would start by saying that we don't necessarily need to use the word problem.
Mm,
That I think that there's a tendency oftentimes for people to put a label on something that may pigeonhole them. And
hmm.
so the kind of language that I like to use is, are you where you want to be in your life? And
Love
then I
that.
break that down. How are you doing physically? How are you doing emotionally? How are you doing spiritually? And by spiritually, I don't mean religion, I mean spirituality.
Hmm.
And I just want to explore all of those areas with my clients because I think they're all relevant, they're all pertinent, and one is not necessarily more important than the other. So I ask them to take a look at all of that. And then what I do is I'll phrase it again in terms such as, well, where would you like to be? What would you like to be doing?
Hmm.
What is it? I really encourage people to identify what their why is for making changes. Is it because somebody told you you should? Or is it because you feel internally like you want to make some changes? What is it that you're seeking? What are your goals? Is it externally motivated or is it internally motivated? If somebody came to me and said, I really want to get my eating under control so that I can look great for that high school reunion. Well, studies have shown that an external kind of incentive like that
Hmm.
can work for a very short amount of time. It can get us motivated, but in order to be able to maintain that level of motivation, it has to come from within. There has to be some compelling reason where you just feel that this is not working for me. It's like your truth. This
Hmm.
isn't working for me, and I want to make some changes. So, getting back to your question about, how can people know if they're eating for multiple reasons and what are some things they can do if they sense that they are, if they feel as though their relationship with food is not where they want it to be, I'll ask them about other parts of their life because that will give me a bird's eye view into what's maybe going on. So I might say something like, how's your health? How are you feeling? And I'll explore with them. And this is where my wellness coaching comes in with my psychotherapy. I'll explore with them. What's your sleep habit like? How much are you moving your body? Um, how much are you trying to eat nourishing food and on a regular basis? So that what I'm doing is I'm covering a whole bunch of bases and then helping them to identify um, how's your how are your primary relationships? How do you feel about your work? Because if somebody is really unhappy in their work, they're going to try to compensate for that and get pleasure in some other way. Now, they may get pleasure by exercising or by socializing, but they also may get pleasure by altering the way that they feel, sometimes with substances, sometimes with behaviors like over shopping, whatever the case
Hmm.
may be.
Hmm.
So I'm interested in the holistic view of a person. And so I might even say to them, what are the five biggest challenges in your life right now? And of those, what's the biggest? So that we're identifying and I'm getting them to look inside of themselves and say, how are things going with me?
Hmm.
How's my life moving along? Rather than robotically just going from day to day. Am I where I want to be in my relationship, in my parenting, in my education, in financially, a whole bunch of things? Am I
Yeah, I
literally
think that's
living
so
where I want
important.
to?
Absolutely, because I think that a lot of times, it's happened to me many times, especially being a mom and trying to run a business. I get it. Like there's so many things you almost have to go on this autopilot mode where you just trudge through and these are the things I got to get done today. And if you don't take that time to look at all those areas of your life, and all of those holistic areas build your health, build your overall quality of life. And if there's something up somewhere in one of those, then yeah, you are going to be looking to something to kind of help you out. And oftentimes it can be food or something else. So I love that was just like a funnel of tapering down to getting to the root cause of a behavior. So I love every single one of those. So what are some?
Well,
Oh, go ahead. Tell me.
I just wanted to say, just
Yeah.
to finish up on that. And so I'm interested in also teaching clients how to have realistic expectations and goals,
Mm,
and that they shouldn't necessarily assume that something has to be a big leap in order to matter. So, getting back to the stressors in a person's life, when they identify the biggest stressor, and I'll ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being horrendous, how much does this stress you? Let's say they say an 8, okay? So I'll say, well, what's something that you can do over the next week to bring it down to a 7 or a 6?
mm,
Rather than how can you bring it to a 0 overnight?
mhm,
What's something that you can do to just balm yourself, to calm yourself? Because I'm trying to get them more into their body. I'm trying to get them away from the head, which is where a lot of the chatter happens,
mhm,
more into their body and identify what are some ways that I can calm my body. And if they feel like they have to go from feeling frantic to feeling really zen and serene, that's too high of a bar. So if I
mhm,
say to them, what would help your body to feel calmer? Or what are some muscles in your body that are wanting to soften? So I use this gradation rather than uh, putting an expectation on them or allowing them to put it on themselves. That's just going to lead to discouragement.
mhm. And more stress and probably,
Exactly.
furthering the behavior along for sure. I think
That's
that's
right.
really, really good to just really be conscious of what little steps can be taken, and checking back in with yourself. How did that go? Okay, that failed, or you know what, that even helped me even ever so slightly, and now I'm able to move to the next step. So when it comes to shifting away from old habits and doing that in a kind of gradual way, how do you feel? I don't know. How do you feel that people respond to that gradual um, action?
Well, I think that what the reason why it works and the reason why I keep coming back to it is
Hmm.
because it's what worked for me.
Mm,
And I think that people oftentimes have really unrealistic expectations of themselves,
hmm,
and as you said before, that causes stress. And stress prevents us from being able to really think clearly.
hmm,
So it starts this whole cycle of uh, something that's really counterproductive. And so what I do is I help them to distinguish between, are you having a mental thought or are you having a physical sensation?
mm,
So to try to separate the emotional and the physical. I always ask my clients to be aware of what their self-talk is.
mm. So
And
important.
exactly. I mean, a thought is not necessarily fact. And so I try to get them in the habit of asking themselves, okay, I'm having this thought. Is it a fact? Is there evidence that supports it? Or is it just this mutation of reality that's drifting by like a cloud that I can allow to just keep drifting? Because our self-talk is very powerful. And then where it really gets interesting is when I ask them, would you talk to your child? Would you talk to your niece or your nephew the way that you talk to yourself?
Oh,
And
so
often
powerful.
it's so powerful. And if they talk to themselves differently, then they're being inconsistent. They're being one way with other people and more punishing with themselves. So I just gently remind them, check in with yourself, see what the self-talk is, and challenge your inner critic. Don't necessarily assume that it knows what it's talking about. Sometimes it bullies its way into the front seat and
Mhm,
then the driver's seat. And I think that by challenging it and standing up in our power and saying, wait a minute, you've had a big control over me a lot of my life. I'm not comfortable with that anymore. I don't really even know if I trust you half the time. So we're going to do a little bit of debating here. And this all can happen while you're at a red light. This can happen while you're on your way to work or while you're sitting at your desk, or it can happen anytime you're in a meeting. So this is something that I ask people to do. I also ask people to practice self-compassion, to look at themselves and to remind themselves that life is hard. And even if you're blessed and you're an American and you're not in a war-torn zone and you have food on the table, uh, you still live in a world where there's a lot coming at you.
Hmm.
There's a lot of stimulation, and the pace that we are expected to operate on, I believe, is not healthy and is unrealistic and not sustainable. However, people almost feel like they can't get off of the treadmill. And so it becomes a, okay, get up and do it all over again type of thing.
Hmm.
So I will ask my clients, I will say, uh, are you living a pace that really works for you? And if not, are there any slight changes that you can make? Because even being aware and saying to yourself, this isn't a pace that's really good for me, but I have to do it until the semester ends or whatever the thing is,
Hmm.
then at least you're experiencing some self compassion because you're saying, yeah, this is hard. This is hard.
Yeah, I
So,
think that's so good. Touches on a lot of things that I personally have struggled with too. And I think that being able to talk back to that voice is
mhm.
very, very important, very empowering, but also a very loving thing to do. And that is truly, you kind of open the gates or crack the door open for you to be able to start to head down a different path for yourself than what you've always been used to doing, whether when it comes to anything emotional eating and beyond. So I love everything that you've said there.
The other
Go
thing
ahead. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, the saddest, most unfortunate thing about people who get into a cycle of emotional eating that becomes destructive is the degree of shame that they feel.
Mm.
There's a message that we get that if we're overeating, it's our fault. We don't have any control. We don't have any willpower, that we should just stop eating. There are some people who truly are food addicted.
Mhm.
And for them, they're not able to stop unless they get these addictive substances out of their system. And so I feel tremendous sympathy and empathy for people who are obese walking around in our society, because I believe that many of them are food addicts and may not realize it. And they're caught in that cycle of basically staying addicted to their drug, which happens to be legal, but that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that it's not dangerous. People can die from obesity. It can
Yeah.
be fatal. So
Yeah.
I work with my clients around, again, the self-critic, the self-talk, and feeling of shame, feeling like you're a bad, damaged person because of the way that you eat, and really reframing all of this and changing that so that you're supporting yourself in a way that actually not only gives you energy, but also gives you the wherewithal to make the changes in your eating.
Yeah, and it's really, in a sense, reclaiming your freedom because you do feel so shackled to this behavior or cycle that you've gotten yourself into. And I remember thinking when I was really struggling with emotional eating and flip-flopping between anorexia and overeating and binging and all the things, thinking, wouldn't it just be wonderful to not think about food? Like,
Mhm.
how much mental space could I allot to other things that are so much more important than how I'm going to buy these groceries to get a cake, to buy a cake, and just takes up so much mental real estate in your life. And to be free from that is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So any other tips regarding emotional eating that you wanted to touch on or that I've interrupted you through?
No, you're not interrupting me. I'm loving this conversation. I have some alternatives to emotional eating
Oh, yes, I'd love to hear
that
those.
I like to share with people, because emotional eating, and I want to be really clear with people. Again, if you're eating because you're bored, or you're eating because you're lonely, or you're eating because you're stressed, you're not a bad person.
Yeah,
You're not a
totally.
bad person. If you find yourself doing that and you feel that it's not serving you, then you may want to take some of these suggestions into consideration, but not from a punishing, punitive point of
Mm,
view,
mm-hmm.
but one from, hmm, I really want to be living a life that is less obsessive around food. I maybe want to be at a weight where I'm more comfortable in my body. And that's the other thing. When I work with people around body image, I ask them to distinguish, and I help them to do this, between how they feel in their body and what they think they look like.
Oh, I like that.
Because when people look in the mirror, and this is particularly true with women, when women look in the mirror, let's say they're looking at a full length mirror, and let's say it's before they get in the shower, they don't have any clothes on. 99% of the time, they look exactly at the part of their body that they like the least.
Mm,
So what that does is it makes it seem in their brain as though that's the only part of their body, at the exclusion of other parts. So it magnifies that area that they don't feel good about, instead of keeping it in perspective. So what I recommend to people who are really struggling with that is to for a while, just for like a week, see what it's like to only look in a mirror from the neck up.
hmm.
Just conduct that experiment. See what that's like. See if it offers you a freedom from becoming fixated and obsessed with the parts of your body that you feel are flawed. So that's just a little tip. But
I
some of
love
the
that.
al- some of the alternatives to emotional eating, allow yourself to receive. And this obviously is a broad brush that I'm painting, but allow yourself um, to be treated the way that you aren't yet able to treat yourself. Another one is to write yourself a letter listing the positive things you have going for yourself. And it's a way of shifting your brain away from the critic part toward the self affirming part. And the thing that we focus on more gets bigger. So
Mm,
when we do these things, what we're doing is we're actually resetting our brain path or neural pathways. But you have to practice and do it over and over and over again. Identify when, where, and with whom you feel safest. So who are the people that afterward you feel safe emotionally, you feel that they have given you energy, you feel like you didn't have to wear an emotional mask during your time, you felt as though you were being your authentic self. Spend time in nature. Nature is really calming and soothing, and we all have access to it. Some of us have more access than others,
mhm,
but spending time in nature, it's there for the taking. But we're so busy with our day-to-day lives that we don't stop and just take all that in. And nature has a beautiful rhythm to it. It's actually very calming.
mhm.
Listen to an uplifting podcast is another thing that you can do. Declutter an area of your favorite room so that you're making a bit of a sanctuary for yourself. Listen to soothing music. And so, what that requires is it requires somebody to pay attention to, how do I feel when I listen to this kind of music? How do I feel when I listen to that kind of music? And again, it brings them back to their body without them even realizing it. Do I find myself feeling tight when I'm listening to a certain kind of music? Or do I find myself just going, ah, I had a personal experience where I had come home from work. I had a long, full, stressful day, and I was racing around and I was preparing dinner in my kitchen where I had a little TV. And I automatically just went to reach for the remote to turn on the news.
Mhm.
And then I paused and I said to myself, is that really what I need right now?
Yeah.
And instead I put on some nice soothing music, and it was a way of meeting my emotional needs, because I needed to be calmed and I needed to just feel like I was less stressed. Another one, and this is something that's a personal favorite of mine, is to fill your environment with a nice scent.
Yeah.
The aromatherapy, but it could be something that you're burning, like an incense. It could be a diffuser. It could be a spray. It could be something, some cinnamon sticks that you put on the stove and you just simmer. Something again to give your brain the message of calm and peace. Because when we are calm and peaceful, we tend not to overeat.
Mm.
It's when we're in a place where we're more frantic or more dysregulated, that's when we tend to eat compulsively or overeat, or eat when we're not hungry physically.
Yeah.
And so, like most people, when they get off of, let's say, having a professional massage, when they get off that table, they're not thinking, oh boy, I want to go binge on some sugar. They're in like this Zen place. Okay, so how can we bring some of that into our lives without going to get a massage? Because
Hmm.
every little bit matters. Sometimes we need to just take a nap and rest our body, put our feet up. People can do things like a puzzle. I happen to love doing jigsaw puzzles. I find them very calming. They're not mentally demanding, but it also feels like it's a task and there's a start and a finish. Um, you could learn a new language online if you're looking for something to stimulate yourself. Teach someone something that you're skilled at. Um, and don't forget to play. That could be dancing, drawing. Ask a close friend what they get from your friendship. These are ways of connecting emotionally with people. And just say, well, what is it about me that you enjoy being my friend? What is it? Teach, if you have a pet, teach your pet a new trick. That can be a way of distracting yourself, but in a positive way. Spend time with your pet. Do a good deed for someone.
Mm.
I know that there have been times when I've been caught in the self obsession of uh, just unhappiness or fear of lacking or whatever. And when I'm able to look outside of myself and tend to somebody that perhaps is needing my help in some way, it just gets me out of that loophole in my head,
Yes.
which is so easy to get caught up in. And then you start to embellish things in your brain.
Oh
um,
man, yeah.
I think it's important to surround yourself with beauty, getting yourself some fresh flowers. Most importantly, be aware of your self talk and challenge it. So, these are some of the things that people can do instead of eating over emotional reasons to try to calm their body and satiate themselves in a way that is just as important as food.
I think that's great. Every single one of those things is really kind of an extension of, or it can be embodied in the phrase of self care, right? I mean, even when we're reaching out to somebody else, that shift in perspective that all of those things that you just mentioned can do, that really does shift you away and to a more positive space. And I think that that is really, for myself, I can speak for myself, the beginning of being able to fully change and gradually being able to do that and having all of those in your mental toolbox to be able to reach out and grab, and on a given day, putting those somehow into your schedule. And I love music. I think that's such a good one to just kind of alter where you are mentally, and it can allow you to feel more, or get into a state of just giggling and fun with kids or your husband or whomever is around. I think every single one of those is wonderful. So I appreciate everything that you've talked about today. And if people are interested in finding out more about you, where can they find you?
Okay, they can follow me on Instagram at Sara Levite Wellness. They can go on my website, which is saralevitecounseling.com, or they can email me at saraleviteconsulting@gmail.com. But I wanted to, if you don't mind, Michelle, I just
Yeah,
wanted to add a couple of things.
please.
I don't know about you and your relationship with food now, but I know that for me, I have a really wonderful relationship with food. And again, as I mentioned before, there were 10 years of compulsive overeating where I was miserable, I was much heavier, I got sick a lot more often, I was
Mm.
exhausted. And so I believe that the ability to transform from that painful relationship with food to a joyous one is not only possible, but I think it's everybody's birthright.
Yes.
And when people take out the foods that are maybe toxic for them personally, which is very individual,
Mm-hmm.
very individual. I don't believe there's any food plan or diet that works for everyone.
Mm.
But when people take the foods out that are toxic for them and are not working, that is a genuine act of self-care. And it also will lead to mood stability. It'll lead to more intimate relationships because it will give you energy, and it will make increase your self-esteem. And also it gets you back to, I believe that eating is our birthright and enjoying it is our birthright. I also believe that there are certain physical pleasures that can't be denied. So while when we're really physically hungry and we eat a good meal, that's a great feeling. When we're really exhausted and we lie down and we rest, that's a great feeling. If we're really thirsty and we get a glass of water, it's just a simple, lovely pleasure. And then, the other thing is that if we're really, for example, if we're really cold and we get into a nice warm tub. So there are ways of feeling so much better physically. And food, we get to have food every day and have that joyous experience of being hungry, genuinely physically hungry, and then being able to satiate ourselves and feeling all that nutrition uh, pulsing through our body and fueling us. And that's what my wish is for people who are struggling with food, is to be able to get to that place where their relationship with food can be an opportunity for joy, for connection with people, instead of, I don't know about you, but when I was eating compulsively for 10 years, I did not feel connected to people.
Oh no, I would go out of my way to try and figure out how to not go to the pool party or how to not be in a situation with people. Absolutely.
And I felt like I was living a double life because I
Yeah.
ate one way in front of people and another way when the door was closed. And
Hmm.
there was a big discrepancy between those two ways of eating.
I'm
So
laughing because I know that truth. Yeah.
you could
I
relate to that.
totally get that. Yeah. I love everything you said. It's very uplifting and very encouraging, I think, to anybody listening that this is a possibility and life is meant to be enjoyed and
Mhm.
and being able to enjoy it in a balanced way, just as you spoke about. I feel really uplifted, and I'm sure everybody listening to this will feel the same. So I really appreciate you, Sarah, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and have a wonderful day. And I appreciate the opportunity to be talking with you.
Gosh, that information is so valuable and such a good reminder to all of us to really take stock at where we are right now and what we can do gently and with love to get to where it is that we want to be. If you'd like to find out more about Sara, I will leave all of her information in the show notes, or if you're watching this on YouTube, in the description. If you liked what you heard here, make sure that you subscribe and follow for the upcoming podcasts. I've got a lot of great guests in store for you guys. And also, I'm going to be opening up, sharing some things that I'm really passionate about in a longer form medium, which is something that I'm really excited to do so I can communicate with you guys on a deeper level. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye.